Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris, joined tonight with George, and we are going to give our review on The Irishman, which is Martin Scorsese's latest crime/mob film. Whole debacle going on with cinema release and Netflix release, which we're going to get into before our review, because I definitely think it's definitely worth talking about that. But this is the big one. This is one that's been dated back for years and years when this was first announced. This is starring all the big hitters: Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Al Pacino. There we go. The best guy in the entire movie. How did I forget his name? Scorsese obviously needs no introduction. He's done a wide variety of films, but he's very much at home with the mob genre, and it feels almost like a sort of return to form, return to his roots kind of thing with this movie. And not to mention just the three brilliant actors that I just mentioned. It's also almost like a last hurrah. I definitely think for Joe Pesci, who was in retirement before this, has come back for this movie. So it was a really, really kind of overwhelming experience seeing just all this talent on screen with that director directing these actors once again. It was quite overwhelming, actually.
Yeah, it was really nostalgic because, I mean, if anyone's seen stories like Scorsese begged Pesci, he wouldn't do it. De Niro asked him, he wouldn't do it. And they've gone on record saying that's like 40 times. I don't know if that's an exaggeration, but they got him in. And the thing is, jumping in, nobody, when you watch this film, not only, like exactly what I said, you've got all these legends coming back, and obviously Pesci's in retirement, but we've had De Niro in TV adverts, comedies which haven't been the best.
Same with Pacino as well, like exactly the same. Wasn't he in that Jack and Jill? Yeah, that's it.
Dunkin' Donuts advert, really going with his I can't do an Al Pacino impression, but he makes them weird noises. So it's one of them where we know they're capable, and just seeing them all together again. Even if obviously Pacino and De Niro together in Heat, but I think this is the first time Pacino has acted with Joe Pesci, I want to say, and it's definitely his first collaboration with Scorsese, which is hard to believe when you look at the last sort of 30 years of gangster films, how they're both involved in all of them. But no, seeing these guys back together, that to me was the big draw. Like when this got announced, it was even before Silence was a thing. I was so excited for this film, and just the concept of, I think, returning to the mob film, mob genre. The obvious Goodfellas comparisons were there from day one. When you actually watch the film, not only are the Goodfellas comparisons obvious, blindingly obvious, but to the point of obviously they're both based off real life. And I'm not going to spoil who, but there is a gangster that was in Goodfellas that is in this. It's not a cinematic universe or anything like that, but this is real life at the time, real people, and naturally there's paths crossed. And it doesn't make a point of making silly references either to Goodfellas.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got this director and he's doing, he's dipping his toe back into the genre that made him famous, ultimately, you are going to get those comparisons there. Also, Casino as well, I believe, had Joe Pesci in and De Niro, so it's harkening back to stuff like that as well, not just Goodfellas. But this is based on a book, 2004 book, I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brandt. I haven't read this book. You haven't read this book yet, but I know that you're getting it probably for Christmas time. You're going to give it a read. From the bits and like the excerpts that I've seen, it looks like the film is actually pretty faithful to that book. The film itself documents Robert De Niro's character Frank Sheeran sort of in the twilight years of his life. He doesn't really have many days left, and he's reminiscing back to his time in the mob, surrounding the friendship disappearance and ultimately slaying of Jimmy Hoffa, who's played by Al Pacino's character. I honestly didn't know anything about this movie going into it. This was almost like a cold viewing for me. I think I watched about half of one trailer that came out. And the biggest draw, the biggest thing that everyone was talking about, not just the fact that these actors were back, but it was the de-aging technology. This is a story that spans generations. You see them when they first got into the mob. They were younger men. As the film progresses and jumps around narratively with the time and when they're in the very, very last stages of their life. So de-aging tech, we've seen this progress over the last few years, and we were discussing this before we went live. It's very different to like the de-aging tech that you'll see in Disney films now, whether it be the Marvel ones. We've seen it in a number of Marvel movies now, and it looks like they've pretty much hit their stride now. It's almost photorealistic. It's like you are looking at those actors from decades ago now. This was very different, and I remember when the first trailers came out for Irishman, it did look off. It was that very sort of uncanny valley effect, especially on De Niro. It did look like they'd improved it, though. I don't know if that was just me sort of getting used to it, but then when you watch the film, there are some moments where you see sort of like the cracks in the matrix a little bit, the threads here and there. But once you're, engrossed in the story and you're following these characters, it really just becomes a tool to tell this story, and it doesn't get too distracting, I didn't think.
Yeah, I think when you've got a film like this, with the age the actors are now, the trailer, I think the trailer, that shot of him on the phone when it pans around at the end, it's like, like at the time, obviously they worked on it. They spent a lot of money on this CG as well. I think you mentioned the Marvel comparison. I think the big thing they kind of made the point of is they didn't want them wearing if anyone's ever seen what the motion capture people wear, they've got the black, almost like helmets with the camera in front, the dots. There was none of that. I think De Niro said there was like 1 or 2 dots at a push, but Scorsese's aim was, I don't want any of that. I just want to be able to do it in post-production, which is fair.
And I couldn't have seen like Joe Pesci wearing something like that. You do have that, like a Hobbit comparison, for example, like Ian McKellen when he was on set with all these green things. It is that sort of when you've got that generation of actor and you're bringing in a lot of these modern sensibilities with filmmaking, which most of us take for granted now, it is very different. And especially with Joe Pesci coming out of retirement specifically for this film, if they got him in like this massive like motion capture contraption or anything like that, I just can't see that happening. I don't think he'd have been okay with that.
And that's the thing. I think Scorsese was right. I think that's one of the reasons we kind of jumped over it. But obviously, we know this is a Netflix film. There was a lot of politics in the build-up, in the productions of everything. I'm not going to obviously give a history lesson, but I think the big thing was that Paramount originally said they would fund it, and it was 150 million. 100 million Paramount were going to do, 50 million from another company. And then basically when they saw the CGI costs and obviously their ideas for the characters, how expensive it was going to be, Paramount backed out, decided to fund Terminator Genesis instead. Not Genesis.
It may as well be. Dark Fate.
Yeah, called Terminator 3 version 4. And, obviously I mean, as amazing as Scorsese is, and sometimes it's sad that people won't take risks. You've got one of the most talented directors in history with some of the best actors of not just their generation, but of cinema. And people don't want to punt a risk. Netflix did, because ultimately the great thing about Netflix is that they just burn through cash like no one else. They don't care. They just want people to click and view. I understand it. They get a lot of original content. It's sometimes fantastic. They have the downfalls with it, the fact they've never turned profit. But at least we've got the Irishman before they eventually go bust. I've got a lot of respect for them for choosing to pay 150 million. Because again, what probably didn't help in the build-up to this was the fact De Niro had been doing comedies, and these 3 guys, I think the last great De Niro film was, I mean, I say great, I didn't enjoy it, but Jennifer Lawrence, Silver Linings Playbook.
Yeah, that was the big one that got people talking about him again, wasn't it, really? Yeah, I'm going to have a look through his past things, but you're probably right.
We know he's capable, and just the idea of this film, and obviously he hadn't worked for Scorsese in a while as well, it was just someone it just needed to happen. And I've got a lot of respect for Netflix for buying them out. And obviously, for those that watched it on Netflix, there's all the dramas at the cinema. I was lucky to see this at the cinema. The fact that only sort of 3 cinemas within like an hour radius of me had it. And it was like, obviously because of the length of the film, 3.5 hours plus adverts. If anywhere had it, it was like maybe 1 showing a day, 2 if that. And I had to wait for the second week of open release for my nearest one to have it, and it was sold out. They only had 1 screening on a Sunday, and that was it. And I can understand why people don't want to go. But it's 3.5 hours. It's going to be on Netflix in 3 weeks' time. And as I said, because all the chains refuse to show it because of politics with, we want a 16-week window from streaming from cinema to stream. Netflix says we'll stretch it to 8. We normally do 4, but here's an 8-week window. All the chains declined it still. That's why it was more like independent theatres that had it. Again, I respect those cinema chains for showing them. They probably got people in that would now. And not that it's annoyed me with the cinema chain I've got a membership with, but it's kind of there. Like there's greed, and I understand why they'd be annoyed with Netflix, but they're the ones that are missing out on making money off this anyway and bringing in more people. Because if one big chain turned around and said, you know what, we'll show this, guarantee more people start going to them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think this is just a sort of a mirror, a look into the current state of movies, like the modern way of making movies, which movies are going to sell, which movies are going to make money, and just looking at this as well. Like you mentioned, the budget 159 mil, give or take. Box office so far 6.6 mil. So it's lost such a considerable amount of money. And you look at the actors in this thing, you look at the director of this thing, and let's be honest, like Martin Scorsese, he can take the hit for this. Like the guy's going to keep making movies. He's one of the best directors of all time. So he's not going to take a hit or anything like that. But I think it's just it's quite depressing to see this, because I'm seeing this increasingly over the last few years, definitely more so with 2019, I think, than any other year. You're getting these veteran directors, and I know Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that was kind of the saving grace for me this year. It was such a breath of fresh air. We need more movies like that. And when we are seeing this shift now for movies not getting a cinema release, but Netflix is kind of that, that way that they, what's the word I'm looking for?
The window opportunity.
That path that like that movie can officially get released. That's like going to be the only way that it can get done. That's really quite depressing and concerning to me in the movie world, because this is a movie that should be at cinemas. This is a movie that people should be going to see. I know that obviously, like with Roma, for example, Roma, that was, it won Best Picture, I believe, didn't it? Was it nominated for it?
It was nominated. It was the favorite.
That was it. Yeah. But the fact that it got nominated and there was all this talk from a film that I know had a very limited cinema release but was predominantly on Netflix, I think that is going to be the future, that this is going to be the only way that you're going to be able to see these kind of movies. But I get it as well, and I don't want to sound like a snob with this, but let's say this movie was in cinemas. Which kind of people would go and see this movie? It would be hardcore film fans. It would be Scorsese fans. It would be fans who remember these actors from the amazing performances they turned in years and years ago, and remember those films. And especially because it's 3.5 hours as well, you're going to get a certain kind of clientele going to see that movie. So even if it had have had a wide cinema release, I don't know if, I can't see average Joe moviegoer going to see, let's go and watch a 3.5 hour Martin Scorsese crime film. It's going to be a very, very specific amount of people. So maybe streaming is better for it, and to like show the other side to it.
I think it's a fair point, because ultimately with this, when this came out on Netflix last week, it was all over social media everywhere. Irishman's out today, and with the sort of the environment we're in now with streaming, with certainly our demographic more so, I want to say, than others. Not that people don't go to the cinema, but for a film like this, they might have split it in 2, split it in 4. Don't know if you've seen a Twitter drama that came out last week. Some guy did a Photoshop poster of The Irishman. So if you want to watch The Irishman as a TV miniseries.
Oh, did he showed it how to break it up or something?
So he split it into 4. So like chapter 1 was like the introduction, chapter 2 was called Hoffa, chapter 3 was like the fish, the 4 the end, and there was uproar. There was people giving him abuse and this social media war that came out of nowhere. And I sat there thinking, well, I wouldn't choose to watch it in 4 parts. Not that they should. However, it's on Netflix. You can pause it when you need to. I think I said this to you when I first watched it at the cinema. I didn't really feel the length of it until just after the 3-hour mark, which is a very good sign.
Did you get an intermission at your screening, or was it straight through?
No, straight through. And I only started to feel it after a certain scene happened. And then I kind of thought that if I was at home on Netflix, not that you don't concentrate as much, you do concentrate, but you're not in the cinema environment. You're not in the cinematic environment. You can have a back room, but ultimately you're in your home or your mate's house or somewhere. You're not at that cinema in that mindset. And I think, I do want to rewatch this. I will rewatch this over the next 2 weeks at some point. There's just too many films out at the minute. Getting the time to do it and the concentration, even making the effort to go to the cinema. It's 3.5 hours, adverts. You got to get there, get back. You're looking really at like
4.5 hours easy.
Yeah, it's not your evening. It's like a good chunk of your day. So anyone that went to cinema, I respect it. It was at London Film Festival. I had to make the choice not to go because getting to Leicester Square at 8 a.m. for a 3.5 hour film is not an easy task. Have very comfy seats as well. But no, it's one of them where it's had this massive debate, and I think another thing that comes out, this is going to get a lot of nominations. I feel the Oscars. Not I said a lot. It's not like like a 10 or an 8, but certainly like a 4 or 5. However, Netflix's biggest Oscar film this year is Marriage Story, which at the minute I think with Hollywood, and I think we're going to get 1917 as the latecomer.
Mm-hmm.
I think those three are going to be the big ones. The list last year was like Roma was going to win everything. Green Book was there. Or like you go to La La Land, there's always 2 or 3 films which like the big ones, and Netflix has got a Marriage Story to do that. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know a lot about Noah Baumbach's film. I've seen a couple of them recently since I saw Marriage Story. I know this is a Marriage Story review, but he's been given the opportunity by Netflix to create his own content, do it his way. No one tells him what to do. The one good thing about Netflix is that they will always give full creative control to the directors. No Warner Bros. Chopping this, chopping that. They get to direct a film and they just get it done. And I admire that as well, because it must make it more appealing for directors as well. That okay, it's not going to be in a cinema, but I'm going to have 100% of what I want to do. I mean, you know the same. One of the reasons why George Lucas went a bit crazy with those special editions, because so many of his earlier films were controlled by studio heads, forced editing. Not that a Star Wars changes are right, but you can tell that his issues in the past stemmed out how he was in the following years. And it must be a lot easier for these directors to jump on the Netflix ship. And to fair to Scorsese, he's been honest as well. He's only gone to Netflix because they're honestly going to fund it, but they're trying to fund it at the end of the day.
It's quite an attractive option, and I guess it does get these sort of veteran directors out of the studio system and does give them more or less full creative control up to a point, which is definitely good for content creators, in that there's not too many cooks in the kitchen, which is so often the case of what we see with loads of blockbuster films. It's nice to get a film where it's sort of out of that and they can just make the movie they want to make. Going back to the length of this thing, so I watched this on Netflix. I didn't see this in the cinema release. And whenever you've got a film like this, you kind of have to know what you're getting in for. Like, if I didn't know this was 3.5 hours, I may have struggled, but you kind of go in with this preconceived notion like, right, this is going to be a long movie. I know what kind of movie this is going to be. And whenever you start a movie like this, before you hit play, you have to sort of take in like a deep breath, like, okay, here we go. And you hit play and it's like, right, I'm in this for the long haul. Now, usually with a film like this, I'll watch this early afternoon so it can finish at some kind of respectable time. That didn't happen with me with this movie. I started watching this around 11 p.m. and I was kind of worried about that. I thought maybe I'm going to have to split this into 2 viewings, and I don't like doing that with movies. I always find it's difficult to sort of get back into that headspace, into that sort of journey that you're on with a movie. I like to just sit down, watch a movie beginning to end as it's intended. And I watched the whole thing. I was completely just, drawn into this film. I do think that at 3.5 hours, there are some bits where it does lag. I will agree with that. And I do think maybe in some bits it could have been tightened up. I think you could have perhaps stood to have shaved off about 15 minutes of this movie. A push. There were some bits that sometimes in the dialogue as well, it almost felt like they were tending towards a lot of improvisation. And it just felt like the conversation was just repeating. It could have been tightened up there a little bit, but I know that Scorsese does sort of a lot of the times let his actors just run with it, and I felt like they did that more so in this movie than a lot of his other ones. There was a bit of it in like Wolf of Wall Street, but it felt like a good chunk of it was in this movie. But I never drifted off. I never lost interest. I was with it beginning to end. And for a film that's 3.5 hours, to have that impact on you and to keep your attention that way and to keep you invested, I mean, that's got to say something right there. So I was with it beginning to end, and I'm still thinking about it now. It's had an impact on me. It's not just sort of like, oh, okay, I watched that, move on. Like, I am still processing it. I would like to watch it again. But I know that finding the time, especially for a film that length, is very difficult. But yeah, no, it was just great to see just like the generational. And as I said, I didn't know what the plot of this film was going to be at all. I've heard of Jimmy Hoffa, and Scorsese's very good like this as well. He did this with Wolf of Wall Street, where if he's tackling a topic or something that a lot of people are probably going to be, if he bombards you with science and facts and figures and knowledge, it's going to go over a lot of viewers' heads. But he dumbs it down a lot. He kind of talks directly to the audience. and sort of gets you on board with it. So when you mentioned Jimmy Hoffa, and he said that a lot of people have probably only vaguely heard of him or knew that he went missing and that's it. That was exactly the camp I was in. I knew that Jimmy Hoffa was a guy that went missing. I didn't know all the ins and outs of it. But then, not saying this movie is 100% accurate, like a lot of biographies very rarely are, especially when you've got a narrator such as this. But no, I didn't know it was essentially going to be a Jimmy Hoffa movie, the death of Jimmy Hoffa film.
Exactly the same here. I knew this was about not an Irishman. I knew it was about a hitman in the mafia. It's based off his book. Now, similar to Goodfellas, this is where I'm actually going to talk more about Goodfellas. Obviously, they take him at the early age. Obviously, I'm going to read that book, but we look at shows like The Crown, where his 6th series to do 6 decades of the Queen's life. It's going to cover everything. Irishman did it in 3.5 hours. They obviously, like I said, I've not read the book, but they've clearly got the book. But right, let's just make this book into a film. And if you look at Goodfellas, it's the exact same thing. What I would say about de-aging, this isn't a criticism of Goodfellas at all. That I'm not even trying to compare de-aging to Goodfellas, but I rewatched Goodfellas recently for the first time in many years, and it made me laugh in the first scene where it's Pesci, De Niro, and Ray Liotta, because he's meant to be like 21 and he's a 40-year-old bloke, and then obviously it goes through all the years, and it's Ray Liotta's aged maybe 5 years in this 20-year period, but it's not a criticism at all. But it's that when you've got Scorsese that's done that past, in 2019, of course you can do the de-aging process. But what I love most was that he could have found an actor in his 40s to play that role, but he wanted these 3 guys to do it. He wanted to age them down, even if it's the most of the film, because they're the actors he in theory had this completely built around. And I've got a tremendous amount of respect for that. And I think that's a really important thing to go with it, that I know it's long and it's very fast, but because of the era it covers, I can understand why it's so long. And I'm so excited to read that book, because I've got a feeling it probably will start with him in the war, and it will end with him with the film ends as well. And I think it's going to be quite, not like a sad read, but it's going to be almost like a sort of not book come to life kind of thing. But does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, totally. The ending of this film, and I don't want to go too into spoilers with this, because I do think that people should check this movie out if they haven't done already, or if they haven't had time to. The ending is very poignant, and you do have this sense of, and I think this is what the film's trying to say, is like, what was the point of everything that you were fighting for, everything that you sacrificed, everything that you did in order to secure either your own safety, your family's safety. Ultimately, it all comes crumbling down because you're not left with anything. And there's a moment earlier on the film between Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro where Joe Pesci says essentially like, your family's the most important thing, keep your family close. And as the film goes on, this could be a criticism in that we don't really get much. It's very surface level with Robert De Niro's daughter in the film and his family. And we do see her age up and everything like that, but she's very much in the background. But I think that was done so on purpose. They're not given much screen time. They're not given much attention purely because Robert De Niro's character isn't showing his own family attention. So they're kind of secondary characters in the whole minutiae of everything else that's going on.
What I will say with the daughter as well, I keep forgetting he had more than one. I've forgotten her name, Anna Paquin.
Anna Paquin, yeah.
Not criticism online. I've never watched True Blood, and I think that's not obviously when she's from X-Men, but I think True Blood was like her big show. And when she's in this film, I before I watched it, I remember it was like she has 20 minutes of screen time and she has 6 words of dialogue. What I will say is that she plays obviously one of his daughters, clearly for the emotion-wise, probably the most important daughter of the lot. I think she's amazing in it. She doesn't need dialogue. Everything is in her facial expressions, and it's like uncomfortably a good performance by her. And the criticism of mine has been very bizarre. The criticizing Scorsese for giving us so little dialogue. The 6 words she had epitomized her character.
Yeah, no, I got everything I needed to from that. Like, I think if you had had more scenes of dialogue, I think that would have done a disservice to what the film was trying to say with that whole thing.
And what I love with her character as well, there's the relationship of obviously Frank, Robert De Niro, and then you've not kind of got Joe Pesci versus Al Pacino, but from the daughter's point of view, you know, De Niro referred to both of them as uncles to her, but obviously she's so on the side of, she loves Jimmy Hoffa, she sees him like family, and she's so scared and intimidated by Joe Pesci. However, De Niro is ultimately trying to point her in the direction of Joe Pesci, and he understands why she doesn't like him, why she doesn't have anything to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Pesci is trying to teach De Niro, these are your family, you need to be with them for when you need to be with them. And that ultimately, in the 3.5 hour film, it's not the central build-up, but certainly if that's 40 minutes, everything that happened previously with his family becomes arguably the most important part for the end. And I think that's where it does come full circle with that length, with that family build-up. And I really enjoyed that. It's a side I didn't think we were going to get. I thought it'd be very obvious gangster film. Gangster he either dies or he turns them in or blah, blah, blah. We've never really had a gangster film where it just shows him in retirement after. Life's just gone on.
Yeah, and it's really, really miserable and makes you think like, wow, is this ultimately what we're all leading to? Because this is going to be really, really depressing in a bunch of decades' time. I know I said I wasn't going to go into spoilers, but I guess I kind of have to for this bit because there's like one big pivotal scene that we need to talk about. First off, I want to talk about Al Pacino. The guy in this movie is like a Grand Theft Auto character, fully realized on screen. He is amazing. This is the classic Al Pacino. He's all the Pacino-isms in this film, but he does turn in a solid performance, some very emotive scenes, and the guy's personality, like, I don't know if that's what Hoffa was like in real life, but his personality in this film absolutely shines through. And he is a really likable guy. Like, he's a shady guy. Like, he's tied up in all this, like, mob stuff and everything like that, stuff with his union. He ultimately wants power and wants to maintain his status, but the guy's just so likable throughout the movie. He has a scene where I've rewatched it and someone left a comment on YouTube which made me completely rewatch the whole scene, where he has a meltdown in his office where he realizes that he's going to jail, and someone says that Pacino forgot his lines and just sort of carried on with the scene. And if you watch it that way, you might think like, oh, actually maybe he did and they just kept the cameras rolling. He's great, and I'm so glad that Pacino got the chance to play this character, because I don't know if anyone could have done this character justice. And you need that likable quality to the character so that you can establish that friendship between him and Frank's character, ultimately leading to arguably the most pivotal scene, the scene that the entire film hangs on, essentially. And what I like about the scene is that it feels very much like a climax of a film, but when it happens, it's very, dare I say, anticlimactic in a way, because it's so quick and it's done, and then the film just moves on. But again, what the film's trying to say is that he is just treating that like anyone else. So many people get whacked in this film, but that one particular, it really kind of hit me hard. It's
because it's Al Pacino, because he's so good in it and he's so likable, whether it's him fighting people over ice cream, shouting at people for being late. It's a perfect Al Pacino performance. Personally, I think he's going to win Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah.
A lot of people are turning to Joe Pesci. I think he's got a very, very good performance and more calm than, I guess, sort of Al Pacino shouting, banging.
It's not the Joe Pesci I was expecting. I think in my head, Joe Pesci is still the character from Home Alone. He's still the what's so funny guy from Goodfellas, but obviously age is a thing now. He has this very much more reserved, almost like Marlon Brando's character from Godfather. Yeah. This guy you respect and you fear, but very calm, collected throughout.
And Al Pacino was like the business version of Scarface. What I loved, you mentioned with some of the lines, one of my favorite lines maybe of the film, which I think got the loudest laugh, was when he's watching telly. He's a millionaire, he's a rich guy, he's with his entire family. It's like, there's one person you can't trust, it's children of millionaires. And then his family just sat there with him.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's just amazing. And what I like with these films, and he did it with Goodfellas, when he goes through the decade through history, they don't need to write the year in the bottom corner like so many do. He uses the real life, the news events for this. Obviously, with the mob, the Kennedys, it naturally tied together anyway. But I like the fact that they chose to do that. But Al Pacino's the best thing. And I think that's what makes that scene even sadder, was that you've had this build-up of his relationship with De Niro. A big chunk of the film is them building their relationship together. De Niro trying to help him. And it's the sad moment in which Jimmy knows he's going to get whacked. He knows why he's going into that room. And it's whether the question I have was, did Jimmy know that Frank was going to do it, or was he expecting someone else to? Because it's literally, right, let's go. And as he turns around, he's painted the wall.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he knew, because I think he trusted Frank up to the end, which makes it all the more sadder. It's like an et tu Brute kind of moment. Yeah, no, I didn't think he was going to do it, because he would have turned out and probably tried, knowing the kind of character that Hoffa was. If he knew that Frank was going to do it, he'd try and wrestle that gun out of his hand. He'd try and live as much as possible, essentially.
Even the great scene in court where that person goes to shoot him reminded me of that night when like it doesn't work. I didn't know if it was going to be a setup by Jimmy Hoffa, but it's just this amazing moment where he's just trying to punch him, and his son is going for him as well, and he just gives like everybody in the court like a life lesson on how to approach somebody with a gun.
If they've got a gun, you charge them. If they've got a knife, you run away. Something like that. Yeah,
he's so likable, and I think De Niro is great in this film, and we've said this many times. Sometimes with lead characters, it's not that they're not as interesting; they are, but when supporting actors have less dialogue, less lines, they have the lasting impression. And I think Al Pacino stole this entire film for me. And everyone's great. I don't think there's a bad performance in this film by anyone. I love the fact that I always forget his name. The British actor.
I know you were going there. I'm trying to find his name. Stephen Graham, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. I love the fact Stephen Graham was in a Scorsese film. He was amazing as the cocky, arrogant gangster. He has some really funny lines with Al Pacino as well. There's a scene when Al Pacino dresses him down after he arrives for a meeting late and wearing shorts, and it's the kind of like old sort of fogey in me is the same thing. Like, you can't go to a business meeting in shorts. Everyone had good chemistry with one another, and I was also happy for Stephen Graham, because it must be not hard for him on set, but jumping into that environment. Obviously, he's done a few American films before, but mainly British TV, British productions. Next thing you know, you're in a Scorsese film with De Niro, Pacino, and Joe Pesci, and you're going to be like, not the character after, but he's kind of like the next gangster that's not the main trio. And I thought he was great as well, and I couldn't fault anyone's performances.
Anything else I can say? My favorite scene in the film, again, possibly spoiler territory, Robert De Niro's phone call to Jimmy Hoffa's wife right after the incident happens. Absolutely gut-wrenching scene, beautifully played by Robert De Niro. He has a stammer throughout the movie, which sort of goes in and out. I noticed that, but that bit, it's almost like he's lost for words. He doesn't know what to say. And you can tell that moment, that action of having to call her, definitely did have an impact on him. He might not cry about it. He might not get over emotional about it, but it definitely, I know he brings it up towards the end as well. When he's sort of in confession, he mentions that very briefly. That was probably my favorite scene in the entire film, but there's so many. If I am going to throw any more negatives out there, as I mentioned, the de-aging thing, it was mostly Robert De Niro's blue eyes. It was very much like Orlando Bloom in the Hobbit film, where it just looked wrong, because you know he doesn't have those eyes in real life. That was kind of weird to me. And I will say there are some kind of ropey green screen bits, digital effects throughout the movie. I don't know if that's to do with it did have quite a high budget, so there's no excuses, but I did notice some, especially when they're on a rooftop, one scene there, the background looked pretty dodgy, and you could tell they were probably just on a green screen. Other than that, I do think that the length didn't quite need to be 3.5 hours. I think they could have tightened it up, but I often say this about Tarantino as well, mostly about Django Unchained, I think, more so than any of his films, but I think they should be shorter. I think they should be cut down, but when I stop to think about, well, which scenes of this movie would I cut out, I kind of don't want to lose any, because it's all great stuff, more or less. So I know that's kind of a double-edged sword with a criticism there, in that it should be shorter, but I don't know what you could have removed from it. But just the fact that I stuck with it for 3.5 hours, I watched it very late at night. I think it had all finished by about 2:30 in the morning, in the AM, which is ridiculous, but I loved it. I need to go back and watch it. I would like to go back and watch Goodfellas, actually. I've watched that once in my life, and I need to watch that film more times. But yeah, it's another solid entry from Scorsese. I know that he's working on another ensemble film next, I think. I don't know if that's filming at the moment or if it's filming very soon. It's great to see these actors back. That's essentially...
Yeah, it's a film that you said it this morning, not this morning, sorry, I edited the video. It's the last hurrah. And it's a sad thing to say, but it's true that you're not going to get these actors. I mean, they might prove wrong and he'll film his new film. But the build-up of, Pesci's back, De Niro's back with Scorsese, Al Pacino's going to be in a Scorsese film, combined with not only all of this, it's also a gangster film. It's going to cover decades. There was something... This is like this. I think this, even though there's not been much money at the cinemas, I still feel like this has been an event film.
Mm-hmm.
To the point, obviously, it's on Netflix, but there's been so much discussion online, even the build up to this, even if it is the director taking hits at Marvel and being asked non-stop every week, does he actually like Marvel or not? Even all of that has built up to the release of this film. Seeing Marvel fans hate it because it's done by Scorsese has been very amusing. But it's, I mean, we've kind of said this many times. This year's, well, up until, to me, Hollywood has not been a good year for film. But these last three, well, we're in December now, 4 months that follow, we've had some absolute corkers.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very intrigued to see this again and see where this will rank, because I think this is in my top 5 now. But it's had such a lasting impression. The same thing you said, that the more I keep thinking about this film, I've had one song stuck in my head for a month from the soundtrack. It's got no dialogue. It's a really weird song I'll tell you about afterwards. But it's had
Is it like the main theme essentially that it keeps?
No,
No, not that one.
It's like a really chirpy. I can't make the noises for it, but when you hear it, it'll be stuck in your head as well.
I will say the soundtrack was fucking great to this movie.
Yeah.
The orchestral stuff and the actual songs that he used, great soundtrack.
And yeah, I'm happy we got to see this film. I'm happy it got a release and that someone chose to back it, because there must be so many films, not obviously The Irishman, but so many great films probably lost in development hell that can't ever get funded. I know I'm not the biggest fan of Silence, but they claimed that was a 20-year Scorsese project, which I still find remarkable, but they do happen.
The thing is, I don't want to turn this into a Silence review. If you want to see our Silence review, I think we do have one up from when that movie came out. I did fall asleep at that movie. It's a fantastically made, very depressing and dreary movie. That's essentially that. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see what Scorsese does next. I mean, this guy's getting up there in terms of age, but he is still making movies like this. This is like a director in their prime, essentially, even still now, which is amazing. If you haven't seen this movie yet, you're a film fan, if you're a fan of these guys, if you're a fan of Scorsese, please do check it out. Don't let the runtime turn you off. It's a fantastic movie. It's a movie that deserves to be watched by as many people as possible. We've had the debate between streaming or cinema release. I do think it's a shame that the cinemas kind of shut it down, but at least it's out there and at least it can be watched. And it'll be interesting to see how this movie stacks up and stays the test of time, as Goodfellas has. I hope this becomes sort of like an unofficial one. Probably not to that caliber, but especially with these actors. And it'll be interesting to see how it performs at Oscar season. So that'll do it for our review on The Irishman. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie. How does this rank to other Scorsese movies? And how do you think this will perform at the Oscars? Anything regarding this movie, please do let us know. There are a lot of movies out at the moment that I haven't seen, that you've seen. You've got a bit of a head start on me. I still need to see Ford versus Ferrari. I still need to see Knives Out, Frozen 2, whole bunch of movies that I need to try and get watched, and some that I need to backdate, because obviously we are coming up towards the end of the year. We are going to be moving into Oscar season again, which we'll have live streams for, reviews on all the big main ones. And not only will we be moving into a new year, but we'll be moving into a new decade. So I know there are talks, there's a storms brewing on the channel about top lists of decades films and everything like that. We'll have more information once we get that sorted. And hopefully we can get a battle of the brackets out to you either before the end of the year or into the new year. I think that's it for announcements. Is there anything else? I think we've pretty much covered it there.
No, that's it. I'll say Oscar season's coming. It's going to get busy, as it always does. Some really big films coming out, which are going to go into the radar. And I think they're all a lot earlier this year as well, so there's less time to get it all done. I think February the 8th is the ceremony this year, but normally it's the end of the year. Not end of the year, sorry, end of February. So stick with us. We'll have a lot coming your way. And some other Netflix films which may be in the Oscar talk too. I think Uncut Gems is the next big Netflix one. That's sometime in January, the Adam Sandler one. But there's a lot of films coming out, and we'll have them all covered on here as usual.
Awesome. So until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.